today I would like to talk about a novel that I recently finished. That took me way too long to finish because I was probably kind of bored reading it. Otherwise, I would probably been through it in like 3 days. But I finished it and I still liked it, even though it wasn't as gripping as I might wanted it to be, but that's quite alright. I'm still glad I read it, as I said. So let's say from the beginning that what I think is interesting about this book is that it is psychological. In my opinion, it's deeply psychological, and there is something as part of the story that talks very much about being under your own spell and kind of the problems that people who are shy, who are people pleasers, go through. So the narrator is unnamed. We have a nameless narrator who is kind of a mousy, dull, not too exciting person who, as though her good qualities are probably that she is deeply empathetic, and cares about people in general, especially those who she loves, which she, through the very beginning of this book, will meet her future husband, Maxime de Winter, in, how is it called again? Monte Carlo. Yes, Monte Carlo. She stays in a hotel called Côte d'Azur. Let's say that's how you say it. And she is a companion to this older woman that I just imagine as just kind of sloppy, fat looking, not the nicest person, actually deeply unempathetic and just kind of histrionic a little bit. Just this kind of old lady, you know, nowadays they would maybe read like gossip columns and all these little magazines that you can buy, and that's just her real life. She's very rich. She is kind of, I guess because of her wealth, part of some social scene, or desperately wants to be part of it. And I guess the way she finds footing in these social circles is by supplying the members with gossip, stories. You could kind of say that she is like a little bit of like a reporter of sorts, you know, like a gossip column reporter. So anyways, so that's the type of like woman she is, and she hired the nameless narrator as her companion, which was, I guess, a real job, or maybe it is made up for the book, but I think it is. I think we should bring that back. I think we should bring companions back if that is a paid service. I think that's kind of a good idea. I mean, there are so many people who are alone and bored and don't have any friends, and they have a lot of money though. So I think, you know, instead of OnlyFans or sex work or that's sort of shit, like bring companionship back, in case that ever was a real job. But anyway, I digress. So our nameless narrator is the companion of that fat rich lady, and one day Maxime de Winter, who is kind of like a notable member of whatever social circle, and he's British. He has this estate in the UK called Manderley, that is close to London, 6 hours away from London, actually, by car. And that estate is quite famous, I guess, because of its beauty. It's a very big property, very big home, and him and his late wife, Rebcca, used to have like fancy parties at this estate, and a lot of, you know, people would find themselves there, and it was just one of those places to be. So the rich old lady, which I could probably tell you her name if anybody cares. Her name is Mrs. Van Hopper. Let's say that's how you spell it, or that's how you pronounce it. So she sees Maxime walk in, and she's got some intel, she's got some pictures or whatever to show him, and she tells her little companion or nameless narrator to just fetch some pictures from her room in the hotel, and because she thinks that might be a good way to bridge contact with Maxime. So that's what happens. Maxime doesn't really care. He's not really into Mrs. Van Hopper just kind of intruding on him and trying to befriend him. However, he does notice the narrator in her shyness, and she is also going through some painful secondhand embarrassment by her boss's attempt to charm Maxime. And I guess he kind of notices all of that, and he probably notices some qualities of her that he likes. So long story short, he kind of takes her out, takes her on dates. He drives her around Monte Carlo, and it's very like, that's actually something that I don't really care for, but it's just like very, you know, like a nice European setting at the coast and driving around in your old fancy car and, you know, pretty things, kind of like that. Lighthearted things. But I guess there's also like a darkness that comes in rather quickly, actually. So he takes her on these dates where he drives her around, and he drives up this hill with her, and on top of the hill they can see just kind of the coast and the ocean, and she notices for the first time this switch in him where he is completely checked out and looks like, I don't know, if you ever seen someone who kind of dissociates, I guess that's how he looked like. And she got a little scared of that, and he came back, and you would kind of know that there's some significance to him looking at the sea. So they drove back, and she goes through all of these kind of like emotions, which I do like the descriptions of them, because it's just a very feminine perspective on dating. Not dating, but just like, it's a very feminine perspective, like the emotions that we feel, and it's kind of ridiculous and a little over the top, and the turmoil that she feels about everything. And there is also a symbolism pretty early in the book. So they drive, and I'm not sure if that's the exact drive. I think it was some other drive, but there's this woman in like dressed in all black. So if you're European, you know old school Europeans still do that. People in Greece still do that. The village where my Hungarian grandma is from still to this day will wear black until they die, when their husband has passed away. So you will see like, so she saw a woman dressed in all black walking up the road and waving to her, and I do think that is kind of like a foreshadowing of the death, or the dead woman that is about to enter her life. So things progress, and it's a little tumultuous for her, because she does realize at some point that Maxime's wife died in a quote-unquote boating accident a year ago, and that is, of course, somewhat recent. So she does realize kind of like this recent trauma that he must have went through. And her employee, Miss Von Hopper, gets sick and is bedridden, and she has influenza, which I'm actually not sure what influenza is, but it's one of these old-timey sicknesses that you used to have, I guess, and not anymore. And yeah, she's bedridden, and after being bedridden for weeks, she has like the drastic ambition to go to New York City and visit her family member. And of course, her little companion needs to come with. So the little companion finds herself all devastated on the floor of the bathroom, and it's like so dramatic. You know, you're 20 years old, and it's kind of so interesting, like the fantasies that women have, like these very vivid like imaginations of how something is gonna go. Like, this is how we're gonna say goodbye, and then I will write this letter, and he will receive it this way, and he will write it and tear it apart, and or just not even really read it, and just like throw it in the trash. And she has this whole like episode, and anyway, she decides to say goodbye to him real quickly, and that turns into having breakfast with him. And as they're having breakfast, and him realizing that she's going to New York City, he decides to very nonchalantly propose to her in the most, unspectacular fashion. Just like, oh, well, we're just gonna get married, so then you don't have to go. Like, kind of like this. And there's something kind of curious about that part, because as he's proposing, as that conversation happens, she of course starts daydreaming again, and thinking about the big wedding that they're gonna have and all that stuff, and the dress she's gonna wear and how spectacular it's gonna be. And he pretty quickly says, like, no, I already had that, like that's not gonna be like that anymore. So then she very promptly goes over mentally how that is actually the superior way to get married, and finds reasons for that. And there's a lot of cognitive dissonance happening, and a lot of like so I think it's kind of curious. It's just something that we do, like when we're getting disappointed. It's kind of like a psychological function of ours to just be like, oh well, that's better because. And some things are just relative. Like, I personally would never want to have a white fucking wedding with like a million people. Ugh, nein, absolutely not. So I would be very happy. I would be very happy about her statement. But anyway, so they plan to get married. They have like a little honeymoon, and in Italy or something. And then they move to Manderley, and I really like that scene as it's being described, of her driving up to Manderley in his car, like sitting next to him as they're driving up there. They're driving through these like very dark woods, and it's a huge estate, so you have like a little drive up there, and it is kind of like creepy and ominous and dark. And eventually they pass that woods part, and a huge wall of like blood red, I think you call it rhododendrons, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but rhododendrons is right next to her, just kind of stretching upwards like a huge bloody wall. And then you see Manderley and like all its glory. And I don't know if any of you ever read Rebcca. Nothing really happens. It's just a description of rhododendrons, but I did enjoy that. Almost like most out of this book is that just that little part of the bloody rhododendrons. There is also something, like very death related, like blood and this big wall of something beautiful that also kind of suffocates you. Anyway, so they arrive there, they meet the staff, and she meets this woman that is just kind of hellbent on making her life very not easy. Mrs. Danvers, she's this old like skeleton woman with sunken eyeballs, and she is obsessed with Rebecca, the dead wife, and very soon in the book, the narrator will see that Rebecca, as much as she's dead somewhere in a mausoleum, she is very much still alive and still wants to show in this estate. And that goes just from everything is still decorated as she wanted it to the tea is at the certain hour that she wants it and the way that she wanted it, and the dining plans and the whole routine in the house and the way that festivities were being held. Everything is still like on the clock of Rebecca. And so the narrator is already, as I said, kind of a mousy little people pleaser. She walks on everybody's eggshells. She doesn't want to, intrude on the routine. And as much as I can, to an extent, relate to that, I couldn't to this extent at all. Like, you're the boss here. Like, this is your estate now. You won the lottery. You married this guy who is handsome and rich and owns this beautiful place, and this is yours. And you still want to not intrude on the established routine of the ex. Like, no. I would have put my foot down. And there's been, because I'm saying that because there's like some quote unquote confrontation about, she's like, oh, could I have my tea? And then one of the butlers is like, oh, well, Mrs. De Winter, which the previous Mrs. De Winter, would have the tea at 5 p.m. and so forth. And then she's like, oh, okay, I can wait. Stuff like that just kind of pissed me off. But yeah, the staff is still like very much on the clock of her and just kind of rubs. And I'm not sure if every staff member consciously rubs it in her face. That one skeleton-like old lady, Miss Danvers, certainly does, but I think everybody else is just kind of conditioned. But yeah, this is why I'm saying put your foot down. It's because like there is a little bit of friction. You know what I mean? Like, she does still have to hear about this woman all the time. So yeah, but it definitely pissed me off, like that part of her that just doesn't wanna intrude and just like very carefully walks around the house, and she's very shy and nervous, and I mean I certainly am too, but at some point it's like, hey, I live here. And that just kind of never happens. Yes, so another aspect is that the more she hears about Rebecca, the more that she learns about her, the more insecure and jealous she becomes. So Rebecca is this like tall woman, probably in her 30s, with this like angel-like face, and she's beautiful, and she has this like cloud of black hair that just like wraps around her, like white skin, and she's just like this ethereal kind of creature that inhabits this house and is just like so confident and everything that Rebecca is not. And that's where I would say is another aspect that is, I think, very psychological, because I do think that, I mean, she never met Rebecca. And I think part of what she imagines her to be is a kind of her shadow side. So everything that she doesn't grant herself to be. While she is like, as I said, very much like walking on eggshells and timid, and Rebecca is like this fearless, beautiful creature that just does what she wants to do and has a lot of fun doing it. So I think there's definitely like a shadow of self aspect to this book. And she also, a curious thing is that she keeps thinking that her husband Maxime is constantly reminiscing about his ex-wife, and when she finds him looking like he's disassociating or something, is like, oh, he must still think about her and like how much better she is, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of jealousy that increasingly drives her. She's not driven full on crazy, but I think it does really wear on her. And there is this one part that I also quite enjoyed, is where she sits at the dining table, and that was just after she met this like cousin of Rebecca, and that Maxime was forbidding her to see. So she has this like, she met this person that was close to Rebecca. So I think that was like the moment where she had this like break from reality in a very like mild way. It was like a minute of a break from reality where she's sitting next to Maxime, eating or not eating, because she is in her head thinking that she's Rebecca, and just kind of like talking to this cousin, and she is mentally going through a scene that she's making up in her head, and she's participating in it as Rebecca, while her husband is watching her and is like, what the fuck are you doing? What is going on with you? Which I kind of really like. I like that little scene where she is, it's almost like the ghost of Rebecca has entered her, and she is, and I'm not meaning that in like a haunted way, I'm meaning that in like just in like a psychological way of her like jealous obsession has turned into actually being inhabited by her for brief periods of time. So that happens eventually, and Miss Danvers plays this like disgusting little trick on her. They have this like fancy dress ball, and Miss Danvers says, oh, why don't you, because everybody has to like dress up in some weird way, and she's like, why don't you wear this dress? Like this, there's this big painting on the wall of like a previous family member of the Winters, which I guess they have this like lineage that goes way back, and there's this drawing of her on the wall, and since the narrator can draw, she takes up Miss Danvers' suggestion. She makes a drawing of that picture in the hall and says, okay, this is what I'm going to wear, and it's going to be a big surprise. And she sends it to a tailor in London and gets the costume, including a wig and all. And then the night of the fancy dress ball comes, and she wears that and comes down the stairs, and Maxime looks like as if all blood was drained out of his body. He looks very pale and very shocked and also angry. And apparently the costume that the head, how do you call her, a maid or whatever, suggested is the last outfit that Rebecca wore to the last fancy dress ball. So Miss Danvers this is just one of the many ways that she keeps fucking with the narrator, and at some point really like heavily encourages her to commit suicide, which at that point the narrator is almost like inclined to do. So yes, this is actually also the part where things turn dramatically. This is kind of the climax of the book. Yes. So the narrator confronts Mr. Winters about this costume thing. She is standing at a window, an open window, and she's like kind of suggesting her to just jump out. And there's this heavy fog that takes up the entire estate. You can't even see anything, and the narrator does consider jumping out. However, that is the moment in which she kind of had enough, thankfully, because it's up to that point just like you just want to shake her, you know, like slap her and just like wake the fuck up. Like this is your fucking house and this maid can be fired. Like you don't have to go through all that shit. Anyway, so that happens. She decides not to jump and finds herself kind of outside, walking around in the fog, and then she hears these like rockets, and they're really loud. And for a moment she thought, oh well, because they had that fancy dress ball the night prior, these are just some rockets that people still had and they're just shooting them. But turns out that this like big ship got stranded at the shore, because the house is also like right at the shore. Like it's just like really nice setting. Yeah, so the fog got stranded there because of the fog. But did I say the ship? The ship got stranded there because of the fog, and they shot these like emergency rockets or whatever for help. So, and this is gonna be like the big twist. So Maxime runs down there. The narrator in the meantime goes through some sort of like how do you call that? She has a coming of age moment. So this is where she changes, because she had her breaking point. She had enough. She confronts this like antagonistic mate, and she decides that she is different now, and everything feels different to her. And so what happens with that ship is that something broke and they had to repair it. So there's these divers that have to come out and like go down on the bottom of the ship and see what's wrong. And the protagonist is kind of watching that happen, and at some point goes back into the house, and the head detective of the village close to the estate kind of pays her a visitation and tells her that as they were working on that ship, they found the boat that Rebcca supposedly has taken that night she died. And it is very much still on the ground there, and a dead body is inside. So at first, obviously, it's like, oh, whose dead body could that be? Well, long story short, turns out it's Rebcca. And it turns out it's Rebcca because Maxime confesses to the narrator that he actually killed her. He shot her. And he hated her. He actually never was in love with her. As beautiful and charming and whatever she was also very much a sociopath. So if I would armchair diagnose her, I would say she does have antisocial traits. And she is definitely kind of insane. The reason why she killed her is that she had this affair with her fucking cousin, who just kept coming by, and they met in London. She had like this place this little place that she had in London where they would meet, and then he would also come by to Manderley, and she had this little boathouse. She's just like fucking her cousin, and really bizarre. And I think the husband at some point had enough and paid her a visit in the boathouse and just kind of shot her. And at that point she looked very sickly, and something was up with her anyways. Like she physically or mentally was declining. And yeah, he shot her, and then he dragged her into her boat, and he poked some holes in it and drowned her. Or she was already dead, but he drowned the boat with her in it. And apparently did not even think about removing her ring or anything telling from the body, which, okay. Not so smart. I kind of feel like somebody would think about that, but anyway, they do find that. They do identify her as Rebecca, so whoever is laying in the crypt is not her. Maxime basically just found someone to put in there. And yeah, then the ending of the book is just more or less how to basically him being incredibly lucky about not getting caught as the fucking murderer that he is. And I could go into detail. I do gotta say that part, didn't necessarily like drag on. I think somebody who like thoroughly enjoyed reading this book might also enjoyed the last part, but I did kind of notice that I kind of just wanna finish the book so I could read another book that I would like to read. I have two books that I kind of want to read, and one is Blood Meriden by Cormac McCarthy, and one is Wittgenstein's Vienna, which is more like I don't know how you would call that. It's not like it's not a biography. It's just more. It talks about Vienna at a certain period of time, and also with the focal point on Wittgenstein. But yeah, this is my very. I don't know who needs to hear this. I just kind of felt like I read this book and I'm just gonna talk about it. So, yeah, if I have more thoughts on it, I will share them. But I would give this book a 6 out of 10. Maybe a 6.5 out of 10. I'm not unhappy that I read it. I don't think it was a waste of time. I think in a way, it actually was kind of helpful for me to read, because just for me personally, because I do kind of relate to both the narrator and Rebecca. And no, I do not mean that as in I want to fuck my cousin, but just I have these two sides of me, and there was a kind of like a reconciliatory moment for me throughout the book. So that's just a very personal thing. But yeah. Goodbye.